I built up walls like mansions to the sky, protect my heart so it would survive. But you climbed in like no one else could do. The day I knew I needed you, I was drifting out, safe from any shore. Didn't want to get hurt anymore, but you pulled me in like no one else could do. The day I knew I needed you. I was complicated, you made perfect sense. I was slowly breaking, but you knew how to mend. We're searching for some answers, who I was and where I'm running to. I was looking for me when I found you. When I found you. When I found. Felt familiar the moment that we met. Tried to block it out so I forget. Your persistence kept on pushing through. The day I knew I needed you. I was complicated, you made perfect sense. I was slowly breaking, but you knew how to mend. We're searching for some answers, who I was and where I'm running to. I was looking for me when I found you. When I found you. You saved me, changing my direction. I'm falling into our connection. I was complicated, you made perfect sense. I was slowly breaking, but you knew how to mend. We're searching for some answers, who I was and where I'm running to. I was looking for me when I found you. When I found you. When I found you. When I found you. When I found you.
Too many days in the darkness, without a glimpse of the light. Running tired and broken and scared, but I swear I'll never give up the fight. I see you broken and beat, head pulled down over your eyes. Every part of you wants to surrender, but darling, you were meant to survive. With every start, we are born again. Open your heart, spend less time in your head. With every start, we are born again. Open your heart, spend less time in your head. Just like a seed in a garden, you will grow to be tall, staring out over miles of land without it, but wanting to build up walls. Lift me up in your branches, we can watch the sunrise.
shining 24/7. Cause when we're together, it feels like we're in heaven. If it will get dark, you'll be my million stars. I know I can lean on you. Oh, you catch me like a leaf falling from a tree. If I'll be a shooting star, you make a wish. No, I don't fake this kind of feeling, never felt so real. My heart is on the table cause you're my everything. I do, I wanna marry you. Cause when you're around, I know it's true. The way you make me feel is so good, baby. So good, so good. Every single day we spend apart, I wanna be with you. Baby, take my hand, hold it tight just like you do. Feels so good, so good. When I wake up in the morning and I see your face, I'm becoming blind by your dazzling grace. What a beautiful feeling to be close to you. There's nothing else I wanna do. Ooh, and from the fields of flowers you chose to pick me. You're spreading sugar on my misery. And I don't fake this kind of feeling, never felt so real. My heart is on the table cause you're my everything. I do, I wanna marry you. Cause when you're around, I know it's true. The way you make me feel is so good, baby. So good, so good. Every single day we spend apart, I wanna be with you. Baby, take my hand, hold it tight just like you do. Feels so good, so good. And I do, I wanna marry you. Cause when you're around, I know it's true. The way you make me feel is so good, baby. So good, so good. Every single day we spend apart, I wanna be with you. Baby, take my hand, hold it tight just like you do. Feels so good, so good.
Well, good evening, everyone. How you doing? My name is Lee Love, and I am here to help you guys learn more about photography, to educate, encourage, and mentor you in all things photography related. I'm glad you could join me here tonight. Let's see here. Tonight we've got a couple things going on. We're going to be talking about sRGB versus RGB, which may be something that you have questions about. I know I did, of course. It's one of those color space things. Frankly, I was the most confusing thing that I had to deal with when moving from film to digital. But anyway, the purpose of this show, we do this every Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. And again, the purpose is to help clarify the confusion, clear up some of the myths, and also answer some of your questions, give you straight and reliable answers to all things photography related. We do the show here on Facebook, if that's where you're watching, facebook.photomentor.tv will take you right to the page. Or if you prefer, you can go to youtube.photomentor.tv, and that'll take you directly to the YouTube page, which is also nice. Sometimes it's a little easier to do the YouTube channel for some reason. It seems to work pretty well. But anyway, good evening, Dean. Nice to see you in here. Thanks for joining me. Let's see here. Couple things. We again every Friday, or excuse me, let me back up. The first Friday of every month, we do photo reviews, and if you're interested in having your work reviewed, as Dean is asking about, you can do that. And the way all the reviews are anonymous, and I don't put your name on there because I don't want to embarrass anybody. Not that I would. Or I want to encourage people to enter their information or submit photos no matter how long they've been shooting. So any experience, any camera, even a smartphone is fine. The idea here is to help give you some pointers and give you some straight advice on how you can improve your images. One of the mistakes that I see a lot of people make, there's just, especially on Facebook, there's group after group after group where people posting photos and they get likes and that kind of thing, but there's no real feedback from an artistic standpoint or from on how to really improve those photos. So that's the purpose of the photo reviews, is to give you more professional reviewing approach. And it's not whether I like them or not. I review them on composition, technical merit, and of course the story or the subject matter. And that's done from a more of an art background, not really from a photography background, or not really from a like or dislike. Anyway, if you'd like, you can submit the photos. Go to review.photomentor.tv, upload the photos from there. It'll ask you a question about how long you've been shooting, which gives me an idea of how to judge the images. And I'd love to have you submit some work. Always enjoy seeing this. So next week is the first Friday of the month, and that's when we will be doing photo reviews. So get your stuff in early if you can, like now, so that I can start looking at it and working on the review before next week. So that's what's going on next week at next week's show. And of course, as usual, we'll be answering your questions, live questions and things like that as well. Also, if you're a social mediaite and you want to follow us on social, go to photomentor.tv on Facebook, or Instagram is the handle there. And I don't know why I have YouTube on there, because that's not really apply, but Twitter as well, at PhotoMentorTV. And I will follow you back, and we are always publishing new stuff on what's going on and keeping you up to date on what's going on in the industry as well. So anyway, let's see here. So let's, I think that's about it as far as announcements. Oh, one thing I would like to ask as a favor is that if you like what we're doing here, I would appreciate if you just, share this information, share the video, like the page, the Facebook page, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you don't mind. That is a really big help to us, and I know a lot of people ask you for that, but it does make a difference, and I would appreciate it if you would do the same for us. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump right into, I think, the sRGB versus RGB. And like I said, there's a lot of weird stuff in understanding how this all works. And I'm going to try and make it as simple as possible. And what I decided to do is I had actually done a video on this a while back, a short video, like about a 5-minute video. And I looked at it because I was going to use that same information, and I realized it wasn't half bad. There's a lot of ums and ims, and that type of stuff, I was pretty uncomfortable in front of the camera. Still am, really. But it still, the content was good. So I'm going to we're going to go with that first, and we'll see how that works for you. And we will, and then when we come back, we'll answer some questions. So let's go into the sRGB versus RGB discussion first. The question really originated from Victor Nicholson, and Victor asked, Adobe RGB or sRGB, which color space to choose while shooting? And it's a great question. It's kind of a complex question. The more you dive into it, if you want to really get your geek on, there's all kinds of information about this, and certainly people that know a lot more about it than I do. But I wanted to try and address it at least briefly and give you some simple ideas about what it is and when to shoot in which mode. So first of all, there are every device has a color space. In other words, like if it's a camera, your DSLR, mirrorless camera, your monitor, your printer, all these devices manage color just a little bit differently. So to be able to make sure they match, there's something that was developed called a color space or a gamut. Now, I'll show you what that looks like. That is, looks something like this. And this was actually developed in 1920, but was adopted in 1931. And it really is a kind of a chart that represents the perceived colors that a human can see, that the eye can see. And it was developed by, or was adopted by, International Commission on Illumination. Now, that's probably right there, probably more than you really want to know already. And I don't blame you. So anyway, so the idea, though, is that there has to be a way to measure these colors that can come out of an electronic device or actually a printer as well. So you use this color space or this gamut to define that. So again, let me kind of show you what this looks like. If you go to, let's see here, I think this is it right here. Yeah, okay. So if I bring this up, so this right here is there's the three color spaces that are or four really you're going to be familiar with, or you're going to need to deal with. One is called Pro Photo, and Pro Photo has the widest color gamut, or in other words, it represents the most colors and the most saturation. The next one that's the most common one that we hear is RGB, red, green, blue is what that stands for. And now that's a little bit smaller color gamut, or a little bit smaller color space, but still almost fills what the human eye can represent or interpret. And of course, the third one is sRGB, and that's a smaller color gamut and less colors, less saturation, obviously. So what you want to, so these are the three terms that you want to be familiar with, or at least when you hear them, understand what that means. So let's go back to this. So again, so the other thing is there's another one called, again, CMYK, sRGB, RGB, and Pro Photo. Now, CMYK is used for printing, offset printing. So for example, if you print a book or something like that, that's what the printing system uses, and it stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. But we don't really use that per se. I mean, again, that's only in the printing world. So the stuff that you're mostly going to deal with is sRGB, RGB, and Pro Photo. So these are the color spaces that you need to be aware of. And the issue is when do you use one over the other? Okay. As I said before, every device uses a color. Like a printer, a lot of inkjet printers print in sRGB. Well, if you send it an RGB file, then it has to somehow understand how to deal with that. So what's created is called an ICC profile. And this profile is like a converter or a translator, and it translates the colors in RGB to sRGB. It'd be the same thing in a monitor. When you calibrate your monitor, you have a little device that you put over the monitor, and it calibrates it, and it looks at the colors, and it creates an ICC profile so it knows how to map a true RGB color to whatever your monitor can represent, because it's not everything is exactly the same. So make it, the easy answer is shoot in the widest color gamut that you can. If your camera will shoot in pro photo, which the more the higher end cameras will do, then shoot in that mode. If it'll shoot in RGB, then shoot in RGB. And the reason I suggest that is because it's like a negative. You want to capture as much information as possible in your camera or in your negative. And even though you have to, if you convert it down, put it on the internet or print it into an sRGB format, you still now have that large gamut of those colors to deal with originally. And so you can always go down, but you can't go up. Okay, I hope that helped a little bit. Let me kind of explain that. I looked at it as I listened to it. I realized there were some holes in there, and then I needed to fill in a little bit. First of all, what used to happen on the internet is all the browsers could only interpret sRGB. And I've seen this before. So what happens is people will upload an image that's RGB, and they just look washed out, and they don't understand why the colors don't match, and it looks awful. And the reason is because you've got to make sure that the browser, which most of them do nowadays, I will admit, can interpret, and that the system you're uploading to, whether it be Facebook or whatever, will accept an RGB file. And that's the problem. Some of them won't. I don't know about Facebook, but my guess is it wants an sRGB file. And the reason is that sRGB file is smaller file size-wise than an RGB file, because it's got more colors in it, the RGB file does. So what may happen is when you upload to a site, whether it be Facebook or even a proofing site, and they're not able to deal, or the way they convert from RGB to sRGB may not be accurate, and so the image will maybe washed out. So here's what I suggest you do is, if you're concerned about it, and let's say you're using Lightroom, for example, it doesn't matter, but you can make what's called a virtual copy in Lightroom, which is not, it just kind of looks at the image and it creates a mirror image of it. You can then make adjustments to that and convert that image to sRGB. Then look at it on your monitor to see what it's going to look like. And then you can make adjustments. You can boost the color. You can bring the color down, that type of thing. What's called proofing before you upload it. In fact, a lot of software, Photoshop, Lightroom, will do what's called soft proofing. And what that does is it allows you to look at the image in whatever gamut or the color space that you want. So let's say it's an RGB image. You can say, show me what this is going to look like in sRGB. And it gives you a kind of a snapshot of what it would look like, and then you can go and make additional adjustments. Like, let me give an example. I had a book printed one time, it was a little blurb book that I was sending out to ad agencies as a promo piece, and it had really vibrant colors. So when I looked at it in Photoshop, it looked great, but when I took and did a soft proof on it, then what happened is the colors didn't look right. The printer would not handle the saturation of the colors that I was sending it. But I could see that ahead of time before I actually did the printing. So I could make adjustments to that file before I uploaded it to make sure it would print properly. And that's what I'm talking about with soft proofing. If you're shooting in a JPEG format, which we talked about last week, almost all JPEGs on cameras, not all of them, but a lot of them, will only shoot in sRGB. So it will automatically shoot in an 8-bit sRGB file. If it doesn't, you want to check and make sure. So what I recommend is you shoot in a RAW file. It depends on what you're doing. If you're doing sports and you're shooting lots of images and you need speed, then there's probably no reason to shoot RAW. But if you're shooting in RAW, you want to make sure your camera is set to RGB, and the reason is that will give you the most color the best possible. Then from there you can bring it down, you can adjust it and bring it and convert it to sRGB and deal with it. But you want to capture that negative, as I call it, or that raw file, as the most colors as possible. So anyway, and let's see, what is Dean is asking a question here. What are you asking here, Dean? Dean wants to know, whoops, that's not it. Dean wants to know, why am I not seeing Dean's picture? Or his? Well, I'll just tell you what, I'll just read it. Dean says, is that right? If you shoot in RAW, color gamut makes no difference. That's what I thought. That may be wrong. You know, that's a really good question, Dean. I'm thinking about that. I don't know. I'm going to have to research that. I think you can still shoot a RAW file in sRGB, but I may be wrong about that. I'll be honest with you. I just always shoot, my cameras actually shoot Pro Photo. And by the way, that's not the same Pro Photo as a lighting company. That's something different. But I always shoot in Pro Photo RAW, so I never tried to shoot in RAW. In sRGB. I thought you could shoot, though, in sRGB in RAW. Now you got me thinking about that. That's a good one. Thanks very much. That's you win the coffee cup. I don't have a coffee cup, but if I did, I'd send you one, Dean. Okay, that's a great question. I hate being stumped, but now I got to find out. Okay. So anyway, so that's it. We're going to find out about that. So anyway, that's the deal on sRGB and RGB. If you have any questions, ask them tonight. I'll be glad to try and explain them the best I can. But it is important to understand why sometimes your images don't look the way you think they will, because in sRGB they looked a little washed out. They don't have quite the color saturation. Now you know why, because it doesn't capture as many colors as an RGB or Pro Photo file would. So, and I'm going to, I don't know if I have your email, Dean, but I will get it somewhere and I will reply to you directly. And I'll definitely have this on next week's show because that's a great question. So, I think, you know, that may be the first question I didn't really know the answer to off the top of my head that you asked me. That's good. Okay, anyway, sorry about that. Okay, so let's get to some of our questions tonight, and we'll see how it goes. All right, so the first one is from Alba, and it says, what's your preferences for Wi-Fi or Bluetooth in a DSLR? I'm thinking Bluetooth might be better in areas where Wi-Fi, hiking, camping in the woods. I'd appreciate your thoughts. Okay, so Alba, the question is not the right question. So the reason is, number one, the first question I would ask you is why? Why do you want to be able to transfer files from your camera to a mobile device, especially when you're hiking? Because you probably don't have much cell service anyway, so you're not going to be uploading them, I wouldn't think. And second of all, your storage on your mobile device is going to be a lot less and a lot more expensive, actually, than it's going to be on than it is on a memory card or even in your camera. So that's the first thing. The second part is that's not the way Wi-Fi in your camera works. When you turn on Wi-Fi in your camera, it creates a hotspot. So what happens is it's its own network. You turn that on, it shows up and you just connect to it directly with your phone, and so you don't have to you don't need Wi-Fi, so to speak, in your area. So that has nothing to do with it, and so it's not about Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. Either one would work, and so it just doesn't matter. So that's the point there. Hang on one second. I'm just trying to figure out why I'm not getting your questions in here tonight. So these guys are asking questions and I can't seem to bring them up on the screen for some reason. And I want to know why. I don't like this. Okay. All right. So that's the deal with that. So the first question is, why would you do that? And the second one is, it doesn't matter if it's Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, it's going to work. Jeffrey Fitzgerald asked a question, and for some reason I'm not able to get it on the screen, and I'm not sure why. No, that's not it. I'm sorry, oh, here, I see why. Always happens. Okay, here we go. Let's see if this works now. It's the beauty of live shows. Okay. So Jeffrey asked, I may have already covered this, but why are there so many color spaces choices for monitors? It seems like an easy way to choose the wrong setting and think your colors are accurate. It's a great question, Jeff. It's because of cost, actually. Because what happens is when they first, you got to remember, most color monitors, when you're looking for a color monitor, most of the time, you're looking for something that has as much of an RGB output as possible. And most of them don't have that. Why is this? Oh, I see. Got too many things going on here. Most of them originally couldn't represent a full RGB color palette. It just was too expensive to do that. Only, very, very expensive monitors could do that. Well, nowadays those prices come down, and if you look, you'll see that monitors are rated in the percentage of RGB colors that it can represent. There's a few that can do 100%, but most are right around 90-some%. You can get a decent monitor without too much, without too expensive. So the issue is really, the reason there's so many color choices is because of the cost. But most all monitors or things that are, there's two kinds of color, right? There's reflective color. So when you're looking at a color chart, like I don't know if you can see my color chart back here, you can't really see it. Is a reflective chart. So those colors are different than colors that come off a monitor or something that's generating light. So that's also the other reason, is that the ability to produce accurate color in a monitor is very expensive and difficult to do. I don't know if that answers your question or not. Anyway, and by the way, Dean, that's why I'm here, buddy. That's the whole point. That's why I want you to ask questions. So so I got a lot of questions about low light shots in my main area concert work. My main lens is a Canon L f4 due to cost. And in fact, how do you think it comes? Yes, I do think it comes down to skill. So here's a technique, and I wish I had a camera. I don't have a camera body with me here. I've demonstrated this before, but there's a technique you can use, and what you do is you take your arm and you bring it up over here and you put it over on your shoulder, and then you take your camera and you put it right here in your edge of your arm here, and you rest it in this part of your arm. And what you can do if you do that, Dean, is you can shoot at a really slow shutter speed, because you're shooting at f4, and a relatively high ISO. Then you have to be able to keep that camera steady because you're shooting at a slow shutter speed. But if you do that, I used to do a lot of concert photography, but I said I could shoot at 1/15 of a second and get a nice steady picture. Now, you lose the ability to move this way. You only have the ability to move this way and this way, but the problem is holding the camera this way, there's too many axes to move on. Also, if you have a zoom lens, it's difficult to zoom because you got the camera here. But that technique definitely works, and it will definitely get it definitely gives you a nice sharp picture. Now, two other techniques that you should employ. One is what I call double tap. In other words, I'll do boom, boom, boom. I'm not talking about motor drive. I'm talking about I'll manually shoot 2 frames. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And the reason is because a lot of times the first frame will be a little soft because I've got some movement, but by the second frame I've settled down a little bit and I can get a much sharper image. So I'll do double tap on that. And then the third technique is to pre-focus instead of letting your camera focus. So if you know you're going to be shooting, you can kind of pre-focus, and that way the camera's not hunting, because it's kind of hard a lot of times in a concert situation when light is changing, things like that. So if you pre-focus, then that also will make it a little quicker for you. And the fourth thing I'll give you, I said 3, but the fourth suggestion is don't worry about ISO. If you have to shoot at 10,000 and get a noisy picture, then shoot at 10,000, because you can do things to take care of the noise. And in fact, sometimes noise in concert photography looks kind of artistic. But nobody really cares about the noise. What they care about is it's in focus or not. So you can use software to remove some of the noise, but there's nothing you can do if the image is out of focus. So worry about getting it sharp and in focus. Don't worry about the noise. If you have to shoot at a high ISO, then do that. Yes. And that's why. Yes, you want to shoot with IS on that, and obviously, but that'll help some, but still, it takes more than just that. Okay, gotta figure out. Oh, I bet I know why. Every week it's something new. Let's see if that works. Okay, yeah, there we go. Fixed it. All right. Good questions, guys. Thank you very much. I appreciate this. Is great stuff, and this is exactly why I'm here, and I hope this is helpful to you. All right. So the next question is from Stacy. If lighting is near perfect for a portrait to be taking, does it need editing? I would say yes, Stacy. Every image needs something to it. Now, doesn't mean it needs a lot, but you might need to crop it a little bit. Also, if you're shooting raw, then the camera doesn't record all that information, so you might need to sharpen it or change the white balance or something like that. But you can shoot in JPEG and get pretty darn close and not have to do a lot of editing. I used to work as a photojournalist, and I shot both raw and JPEG. And sometimes just JPEG, because the publication or the wire service needed the image really quickly. I didn't have time to process it. I got to take the card, pop it out, transmit it, and be done within a minute or so of the event. And so, yeah, there are times when you could do that. It's not always necessary, but I think you'll find that editing is the other half of photography. There's 50% of it's the capture, and the second part is really the darkroom, if you want to call it that. So anyway, so yeah, and I agree, Dean. So Dean's saying that if he converts it graining, he converts it to black and white, then it kind of becomes artistic, and I agree with that. The trick with black and white photography is here's something to think about. It's got to be graphical. What makes black and white photography work is that it's the lines, it's the shapes, it's the contrast. So you can just take a color image and convert it to black and white, and it doesn't always work. So, but I will tell you that shooting in black and white is a great tool to learn photography. And so what you can do nowadays, you can put your camera on monochrome, or black and white, whatever they want to call it, and shoot in raw, and it will still store it as a color image, but yet you're seeing it on the back of the camera and as a black and white image, and therefore that will kind of help you, give you some guidance on what the image is going to look like in black and white. So anyway, all right. So the next question. So hopefully that helps on the answer the question about editing. So, can you recommend your favorite photo lab? Well, I don't do a lot of printing. First of all, I'm going to make a confession. I hate printing. Printing sucks. And the reason is it never seems to work right. It's always a pain in the butt. I don't do that much of it. When you go to print, the printer doesn't work, or it's clogged, or I got to recalibrate. It's the bane of my existence, even on basic printing. Even when you're printing, non-photo stuff, it seems to be annoying. Frankly, not to get off on a rant, but it seems like our technology has evolved, cameras, video, computers, but printing has not. I mean, it still seems like it's still archaic in comparison. Maybe because it's a mechanical process. But anyway, if I am going to use a photo lab, I would recommend one. I'll tell you here one. I'll show you one that I think is a pretty good photo lab. I've recommended them before, and I've set up clients, printers and stuff like that, and it is, here it is. The one I like is called Bay Photo. And the reason I like Bay, there's a lot of them out there that do a good job, I'm sure, but the reason I like Bay Photo, and I think it's bayphoto.com, is they do a lot of fine art printing. So you can print 16 by 20s on really nice fine art paper. The papers that I'm familiar with are Hahnemühle is one of them. Moab is another great one. Epson is a good one. And these are really high quality, really nice fiber prints. So the thing is, with a lot of printing, I've noticed on labs, they're printing, through a Kodak printer or a Fuji printer or something like that. And it's not, and so it can't print on these fine art papers. It's really more of a glossy kind of a print, and that's fine for certain things. But if you're doing a really nice fine art print, then you want a really nice rag or really nice paper, and that's why I recommend Bay Photo, because I've seen their work and it's excellent. It's as good as you can do yourself. And besides, if they mess up, they're going to reprint it for free. If you have to go through 10 pieces of paper, that's up to them. They're going to get it right and send you so that's the one I would look at. So, all right. T says, I need to rent a lens for an event. Can you give me any rental locations? Well, first of all, check locally. You may have a local store. Then a lot of the camera stores will rent stuff. If you don't have anybody locally, the ones I would recommend, there are two pretty well-known ones, and I think you'll find that these are good locations. First one is called borrowlenses.com, and borrowlenses.com is a well-known, I've dealt with them, they're a reputable organization. I think they have I don't know how many locations they have. I know they opened one on the East Coast a while back, which is where I'm located. And I think they started on the West Coast. So Borrow Lenses would be one of them. And then the other one is called lensrentals.com. And that's the other one. And those are two well-known facilities that will rent, and you can get just about anything from them. And so those are the two. So I would say lensrentals.com or Borrow Lenses would be the two that I would look at. You can rent them for a week or 3 days, I think, either one. And it's also a great way to, kind of try out some equipment to see if it's something that you want to buy. But I will warn you, and that is that renting is expensive. And when I tell people that, they're like, well, wait a minute, it's only like $50 or $100 to rent a lens. I was like, no, that's not what I mean. And I speak from personal experience here. When you rent or borrow a really nice lens from a friend, the chances are you're not going to want to give it back. I have purchased more equipment from borrowing stuff than I ever have by just looking at it in a catalog or online. So, because then you start using it and you're like, oh man, this is great. And you got to have this lens. And so I've had that happen a couple times. So be aware of that. All right. So the other one says, is there an app that strings together a series of pictures into a quick burst photo? I'm sure there is. I don't know of any, Maya. But I would tell you that if you have a PC, I believe the PC comes with something called a photo editor called Picture Maker, I think, is the Microsoft product, and I think it's free. And that would work. Or if you're on a Mac, you can use, gosh, I've gone blank on the name of the product right now. Can't think of it. That's silly. It is, I have it over here probably on this machine. Anyway, the Mac has a program as well. I'll think of it in a second. That you can use as well. And either one, any video editor would allow you to do this and bring in photos, do a transition between one or the other, or just do a straight cut. And you can make those images as long or as short as you want. There's also probably some online services that will do this. But I would look at, something like that comes with your system, and just a video editor is probably what you're looking for, and it'll give you a lot of capabilities. You can also output to multiple formats if you use something like that, as opposed to some of the photo products are limited in video output, like Lightroom and things like that. But when you use a video editor, you've got a lot more choices. So you can even probably output into a GIF or GIF, however you guys want to pronounce it, as a photo that way too. So anyway, okay. Kim says, I'm shooting baseball team photos, individual portraits. How many different poses, pictures should I take per person? Well, Kim, this is kind of it depends on the subject. I've found when I do portraits or large groups or things like that, some people are easier to work with. I mean, I've had some people that get in front of the camera, they're not professionals, but boy, they just fall into it. One or two pictures and I'm done. I mean, they just make my job so easy. And then some people are really uncomfortable in front of the camera. You got to work with them a little more. And so the issue is you have to be able to, thank you, Dean, iMovie is what he said. Can't believe I couldn't think of that. But the issue is how well you work with individuals, how well you make them relax. And so, I try and joke with people, try and create some humor, ask them about something, try and talk to them while they're posing. And especially if it's a baseball team, ask them about maybe their batting average or something like that. And try and get them to relax and forget about the camera, and then you will get a better image of them, the individual. But sometimes it's tough. Sometimes you got to do 10 images to get a really good one. And some people, like I said, boom, 1, 2, you're done, and it just makes your job so much easier. So focus on, no pun intended, focus on getting the right reaction, not worrying about how many images you need to shoot. Now, obviously, you're not going to shoot 25 of each person because it's just going to be too much work. So I'm not saying overshoot. I'm just saying you're going to run into some of those people that are going to take a few more images than some of the others. Okay. So Kendra wants to know, I feel like people make fun of me. What are your opinions about shooting in auto? Well, Kendra, you're never going to hear me make fun of you. In fact, I've talked about this many, many times if you guys have watched this show, and that is I think you should shoot in auto, mainly if you're starting off. And here's why. If you're shooting, the myth is, you have to shoot in manual. You got to learn the exposure triangle. Your images are going to be better. You got to shoot. Here's the problem. They'll look at an image and people ask for constructive criticism, and they'll say, you got to shoot in manual. Well, that's bogus. Okay, and here's why. Number one, a properly exposed image looks exactly the same on auto as it does in manual. What I mean by that, if the exposure for that image is f8 at 1/25th of a second at ISO 100, then it doesn't matter if you dial that in manually or the camera calculates that. It's still the exact same exposure. You can take a picture in auto, then take that same picture, dial those settings in manual, and take the image again, and it's going to look exactly the same. So it doesn't really matter. What matters is why you're shooting in manual. So one of the things I tell people, or I like to teach people, is I can teach you how to shoot in manual. I can teach you the technical part. But the problem is that's not what makes a great image. The cameras are very smart nowadays. They have a lot of technology built into this. So why not use that technology? Let the camera make some of the decisions for you, and you focus on the subject. So I've seen so many new photographers. They're sitting there messing with their camera. The person's over there. You know, people are uncomfortable in front of the camera. You're sitting there diddling with your camera, and it makes you look like a noob, and they're getting uncomfortable. Your job is to focus on the subject, to make the subject feel comfortable in front of your lens, and to capture the best possible image, not be messing around with your camera. If you're still trying to figure out your camera, then you need to be doing more practice if that's what you want to shoot in manual. I suggest you shoot in aperture priority, auto, aperture priority, or program. Let the camera pick some of the information. If you need to make an adjustment, fine. But you need to be worried about the subject. I've had so many people, new students, say, well, Lee, why are my iPhone photos better than my DSLR photos? I spent all this money on this camera. I can tell you exactly why. The reason is because you're not worried about the technology. The camera's taking care of that. You're worried about what's in front of your lens, which is what you should be doing. That is the most important thing. Learning to see and learning to tell a story is much more important than your camera or your post-processing or fixing it in RAW or in post and Lightroom and that kind of stuff. It's getting it right in front of your camera and learning to see. That's what makes a great image, not whether you shot on auto or manual or whatever. Sorry, it's just a pet peeve of mine because I believe that this is old school teaching. It was fine in the 1960s and 70s when we didn't have automatic cameras and you had to shoot on manual because everything was manual focus, manual aperture, manual exposure, manual light meter, everything. But that's not the case anymore. So let the camera do some of the work for you. You still have to, don't get me wrong, you still have to know how exposure works. You still need to know the exposure triangle at some point, but you don't need to start with that. Now, let me back up. One of the places to start shoot in manual might be in Dean's scenario, where Dean's shooting in concert photography and the light's changing all the time, and he doesn't want the camera to make adjustments. He may want to lock in that. So what I would do in that scenario, two things. One, get the proper exposure, and then go to manual and set that in and leave it in there. Or, because then as the lights come on and the flashing and things like that, the light's going to stay the same. Or go to spot metering. I know I'm getting off topic a little bit, Dean. But go to spot metering where the meter is only reading the center part of the screen. Meter on the person's face, and then you're going to get the proper exposure. Because what happens is when you're on one of these other modes is that the camera sees all this black around the subject and it sees all these bright lights and it messes the camera up. It doesn't know whether it tries to overexpose the image. So you'll get a lot of washed out subjects because it sees all this black and it tries to raise the exposure. And there's a scenario where shooting on manual would make sense. But you can still use the camera to figure out what that exposure is first in auto or aperture priority, then dial that in and lock it in. So I'm not saying don't shoot in manual. I'm just saying there are times and places, but for the most part, if you're a new photographer, start in auto. Worry about your subject. Worry about getting the great composition. Worry about your lighting first, and then worry about the technical part. And I'll leave it at that. Sorry. Okay. So Stacy says, what's the best card for shooting a wedding? The one you have in your camera, Stacy. There is no such thing as the best SD card. They're not all the same. So here's what you're looking for. So you're probably going to be shooting, if you're new, you're going to be shooting probably more images than you would normally if you got more experience. But you want an SD card that's got enough capacity. I'm not a big believer in giant SD card memory cards, and the reason is if you have too many images on that card and it becomes corrupted, then you're going to lose everything. So, 32 gigs, 64 gigs is probably plenty enough. If you're shooting video, 128 would be a good one, but I don't think I own any 256s. Even though some of the cameras I have are high res and they shoot 40, 50 megapixels, and it takes big files, but still I'd rather change out cards and have more cards than I would, and that way I'm spreading that out among the cards as opposed to having one card with everything on it. And the second thing is you want a card that's relatively fast. You don't need to spend a lot of money. There are two kind of card formats or card systems you want to look at, and it's going to depend on your camera. Now, my guess is, again, if you're just starting out, it's not the case, but there's what's called a UHS-1 card and a UHS-2 card. I probably have one here, but I can't show it to you. A UHS-2 card has 2 rows of pins on the bottom of them. I don't know. Probably don't have one back here. Sorry. Thought maybe I did. No, these are all UHS ones. Anyway, you probably can't see it anyway. So, this card has one set of pins. You can probably see this here. All right. Well, this is a UHS-1 card, but a UHS-2 card has a second set of pins right across here, and that is a faster card. So it will transfer the data to the camera from the camera to the card much faster if you have a UHS-2 card. Now the problem is your camera may not support that, so you have to look at it. So there's no sense in spending the money because they're going to be a lot more expensive cards, a lot more pricier if it's a UHS-2 card than it is a UHS-1. So there's no sense in buying a UHS-2 card right now. Just get a UHS-1. I'd say maybe 32 or 64 gigs. Get a couple of cards, and you'll be fine. My brand of choice is a SanDisk. I really like those a lot. I've had really good luck with them. Not any failures I can think of. One little tip I'll give you is do not delete images off the card in the camera or on the computer. So just take the card and do not transfer it to the camera, to the computer. Get a card reader, take that card out, put it in a external card reader, import them into your computer, make sure they're there before you do anything with the card, because that will ensure. And then when you're done, take the card, put it back in the camera, and format it in the camera. Do not format it on the computer, and you will find that you'll get many, many less problems if you do it that way. So anyway. Okay. Whoops. So Tara says, I'm thinking about switching from a Sony to a Canon. So again, my question would be why? What is it that the Sony's not doing that you needed to do? A lot of times I see people, oh, my friend has this, or I've seen a lot of great pictures that this guy has from a Canon, they're posting them, and they're just amazing, and so I'm thinking about switching. So my analogy is, if you had the same stove as Gordon Ramsay or some other world-famous chef, would your meal taste the same and be exactly the same? The answer, of course, is no. In other words, it has very, very little to do with the camera. The camera does not take the picture. It's you. It's the photographer. It's the person behind the camera. You can hand any photographer, any well-known or any skilled photographer, any camera, and their pictures are going to be better than yours. It's just the way it is because they're using their skill. It's not about but too many people are hung up on the camera. So the first thing I would ask you is why. The second thing is show me the images that you're shooting now, and I'm sure I can show you why you need to improve your photography and your knowledge, not your camera. So, okay. I think that's it for tonight. Okay. So Dean has another comment here. Let's see what he has. We were talking about using spot meter, and he says most of the time he does shoot on spot meter or center focus, and that's really what I would suggest as well. Now, keep in mind, Dean, that I know what you're saying. You're saying you center focus. You got your position in the middle. They're two different things. A lot of people don't realize that they think the focus point is also the metering point, and it's not always the true necessarily. So what happens is most cameras will average the entire image, even though there's a single spot in the middle. I know you're not saying this, Dean. But there's two different things. One is the spot metering, meaning what area the camera is going to read to meter for the exposure, and then the other one is what area is the camera going to read for focusing. You can move that focusing point all over, but if the center point is on for your spot metering, then that's where the exposure is going to come from. So it's what he's saying is it's great because, and that's exactly the way I would recommend it too. You want to use spot metering. You want to narrow that metering area down, so it's not looking at the entire scene. You only want it to look at the face of the person that you're photographing, because you don't care about the background if it's overexposed or underexposed. You really want to more interested in the person. In fact, when a lot of stuff is happening, I had some shots published, and they're shot in JPEG, and not been happy with my shutter speed, but they work, so never deleted them in the body. Yeah, I mean, you look. So here's the dirty secret, Dean, and I'll tell everybody this. The dirty secret is your client will almost always pick the picture you hate the most. I don't know why it is. It's universal. I've talked to many photographers about it, and it seems like it's... So I do a lot of magazine work, so I will submit that maybe they only want 10 or 12 pictures to choose from, and then they'll pick the 2 or 3 they're going to purchase and publish. I'll throw the ones in, obviously, that I like, that I think represent the story the best. But then I'll put a couple in there. This one's not too bad. Maybe I'll see if they like that one. They will inevitably pick that one over the one I think they should have picked. I don't know why. It's bizarre, but it does happen that way. So don't give your client, or don't submit too many photos. That's number one. Don't give them too many choices, or otherwise they will pick the one that you hate the most, and that's the one they're gonna publish, and then you're gonna cringe the whole time going, why did they pick that one? You got to remember though, their criteria is very, very different than our criteria as photographers. We're looking at a lot of different things. They're looking at, does this tell a story? They're looking at that. We're looking at, is it properly exposed? Has it got too much noise? Blah blah blah. They're not looking at that. In fact, noise is something that most clients never ever even see or mention. We're all zooming in. I see people pixel peeping. They'll zoom in. They'll shoot at 1600. And they go, this thing's all noisy. The client never ever notices that. That's a photographer thing, and so don't worry about the noise if you have to. So anyway, all right, I think, let me give you a couple reminders. Again, next week, don't forget, guys, if you want to submit some photos for review, get them in early, if you will. I appreciate it. I got a busy week next week. The reviews are anonymous. It doesn't matter if they're shot with an iPhone. Doesn't matter what the subject matter is. Go ahead and submit those. And when you submit those, it'll ask you how long you've been shooting. That'll help me kind of help in figuring out your skill level. They're reviewed on composition, technical, and story, not necessarily on whether I like them or not. So if you're interested, go to review.photomentor.tv and submit your images there. I would appreciate it. Also, again, if you're a social type person there and you're on, be sure and follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, or Twitter, and we'll follow you back. And if you are interested, we also, most people don't know, we also have a Facebook group. It's a small group. We keep it that way on purpose. And if you're interested in submitting an application to join the Facebook group, there's a lot more education that goes on in there. You can go to photomentor.tv/join and put in your information. And the reason we do that is to prevent spammers, and also to make sure that we're getting the right quality of people in there that want to help other people, not people that just want to show off how much stuff they think they know. So anyway, that's what's going on there. again, thanks for joining me this week. I hope you guys, I hope the sRGB versus RGB was a good discussion for you. If you have any questions on that, be sure and let me know. You can always send me an email to help@photomentor.tv anytime, and I will reply either directly or we'll add it to next week's show. So, again, thanks very much, everyone, and listen, have a great weekend.